You're listening to 94.4 FM, Salford City Radio, with myself, Jimmy Petruzzi, on the Friday Sports Show. Tonight we have some really exciting guests, local and from far afield. We've got a really fascinating show lined up for you tonight. Our first guest is over in the UK. I actually worked with him a while ago, but we'll sort of get onto that shortly. But he's back over in the UK. He's been coaching in Angola for a team called Caála. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm sure that he'll correct me if I didn't pronounce it correctly. He played for the Angolan national team. He also coached at a very high level. He also played in Portugal at a very high level, and he coached in the UK. And he's going to give us some insights into the world of football coaching and the world of football in general in Africa, and what he's doing at the moment back in the UK. So it's going to be really interesting to hear that. We've also got the a women's football team coach, Chris Horn, who's going to talk about what it's like to coach a women's team at the moment with all the media around the World Cup. And we want to keep the momentum going. We want to make sure that after the World Cup, England had a great campaign. Obviously, they didn't win the World Cup final women's, but they give it a good go, and they came up against the USA team that obviously is really, really strong and traditionally the favourites, but there's been a lot of progress. So we want to make sure that sort of keeps going. It's really important that we keep the momentum going, and Chris is going to give us an insight into the work he does as well. And later on the show, we've got a Wolverhampton Wanders legend, and we've had him on the show before. He's going to come back and he's going to preview Wolves, and he's going to talk all things about football, what he's doing. So we bring you local news and news from around the world, and in our show, aiming to increase sports participation in the area, getting people involved. Make sure you drop us an email, a message, or join our Facebook page, the Salford Friday Sports Show, and let us know your thoughts and so on and so forth. So just to introduce David Dias, who's with us, is going to be with us for the show today. David, great to have you on board. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm okay. It's a long time, Jimmy.
It is indeed, but it's great to see you. And we sort of touched on there your role in Angola at the moment. So obviously you got a vast amount of experience. Recently we've had the African Nations Cup. We'll sort of go into your thoughts around that as well, what it was like being over in Africa while that was on. But let's start with your role with Caála. Tell us a bit about what you've been doing out there, David.
At this moment, I finished my work in Angola. I finished my contract. I worked for 2 seasons and a half. From my last team is Caála in Angola. In Portuguese, it's called Clube Recreativo da Caála. It's a young team. The seasons, they do a great season. The seasons he passed in 2.5 years, just all work with the kids in the first division, the teams, because the budget is low. And the chairman wanted to speak to me, said, David, you pick the team, the problem you have, I don't have money. You need to work with the kids, the 17 to 24 years old, for stay in the first division. It's a big challenge. I do a great job. The kids, they do great. Mm-hmm. He beat the best team in Angola is the Petro de Luanda. He played in the Champions League. He never lose one game in the season. He lose for Caála. Maybe 1 de Agosto the same. The kids do well. It's a really it's a nice season I have there. And then just expect this season to do the same because I'm away. I come to UK, back to UK because I look for new challenge in UK. I think this is my time for doing something in UK because I have a lot of the experiences of football coaches and football. I worked for Barry before. Now I'm ready for have a new challenge. Look for team, the Championship, League 1, League 2, League 3 or whatever, because I know I can do, because I proved myself in Africa, work in Kenya, work in Brazil. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's a great point. And obviously your experience of, being playing for the national team at Angola, you accumulated that experience, and you've got this sort of mixture of experience across different parts of the world, which I think helps develop as a coach, and that's really important for me. We tend to see coaches, certainly in my experience in this country, and that's not undermining anybody, but they tend to sort of stay in one place. I think for me, for a coach to really develop, was quite useful to see the game from different perspectives, like you've done, and from South America, from Europe, from Africa, and so on and so forth, and that's really important. And also the success that you experienced previously, with the likes of Santos, you did really well there too, and you did really, really well, obviously, when you were over in Bury as well. And I think for me too, David, the players, I know from previous experience when I was working in the non-league, in the UK, and you helped bring players and source players too. So and even when I was when we sort of touched base at Bury, you had the ability to some of the players you suggested that we look at were phenomenal. But unfortunately, budgets, and sometimes coaches, they kind of work within the perimeters of what they can see. But from the point of view, we've seen players from Africa come to the UK and Europe and just be phenomenal. The likes of Salah at Liverpool, and Drogba at Chelsea, and the list goes on. Obviously, there's many players. But what about the? Did you sort of keep an eye on the African Nations Cup while you were? Did you sort of manage to see any of that, or how? What were your thoughts in terms of the Angola at the moment? Where do they sort of stand? Because they had a lot of success, Angola, in 2006. Since then, obviously, Africa's a tough place to qualify for the World Cup. How's things in football in general in Angola, David?
The moment the football is in Angola it's don't go. It's not like 2006. You agreed. It should be go more higher. There's one thing more important in this time. You have like 3-4 players. You have one he called Bastos. He play for Lazio.
Yeah.
Now we have another one. He play in African Nations now. This African Nation, he go to a team in France. I think it's Lille. And I have another one. He called Gerson Dal. He go to now. I think he go to Belgium. Some good players. He coming. Young lads. Coming to play in Europe. The football in Angola is. I think the problem I have there is about the organizations. It's not just players. You find a lot of the players in Angola. It's an organization. Before you start playing, you need to have the background. You need to be good. Because if you don't have a background nice, it's impossible. Because the people there, you need to create like conditions for the players. Because it's not like in Europe. No, it's very hard. Like 4 teams in Angola have money. It can do building the academy. The rest of the team, the kids, don't have a chance. You need to play in. It's not don't play in the grass. You play in.
Wow.
Yeah. Without football boots, it's hard. But you can take the players there for this team. Another teams in the first division can catch these players for playing in the first division. It's very hard for coaches when you go to Africa, especially when you work in Europe. When you go there, it's very hard to see the way the kids work for one day gonna be football players like Manucho. He play for Manchester United in the past. He started playing in the street, and then go to Petro del Luanda. He come to Manchester United. This is achievement. All players you want in Africa. I don't talk just about Angola. Talk about Africa. You have a chance like you. I think you listen to the lad he play for Liverpool, Mane. He come from far away, and now he's the great player. I think the people from Angola need to see the way they go to football, because football is for all people in the world is the best things you have in the world. I need more help. I need more creativity. The people who work around the football.
No, absolutely. I mean, for sure. I mean, there's definitely an abundance of talent in Africa and Angola. And for me, we've seen players over the years, from the Ivory Coast, from Ghana, from the traditionally strong African nations, Nigeria as well. But also, the likes of Angola, the technique is there, the desire is there. It's just a pathway. And like you says, I think sometimes from a European coaching perspective, we sort of don't realise that some of these players from a facility and resources, the limitations in the resources, like you mentioned there, was if you go to some of the academies in the UK and in Europe, the facilities are just maybe sometimes for me, David, I think the facilities maybe, I know this sounds ridiculous, but too good sometimes, because the players, they sort of lose that desire. Sometimes the players are looked after too much, and sometimes I think there's a balance between, obviously playing on really typical pitches, but also sometimes the players, they can be looked after too much, and they lose that sort of hunger and desire, and that's sort of getting the balance we can do is really important. But I'm going to bring in our next guest. So we're going to touch base, David, with you throughout the show. David's going to be kind enough to hang around throughout the show. But our next guest is going to give us an insight in terms of women's football, which has been growing in the UK at a rapid rate in the last few years. But equally, we can't get complacent. It's really important that we keep going and keep making sure that we give the women's game publicity as much as we can do. We don't want to get in a situation where we sort of cover it once every few years, the European tournament, a World Cup, and that's the end of that. We've got to keep pressing. So, Chris Horner, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board. It's great to have you on board, and it's really important that we got you on board too, Chris. The reason being is what we've mentioned there, is that the women's football, it comes around every 4 years, the World Cup, and we get excited about that, and the European Cup. But there's people like yourself who are working hard every day, no doubt, to do the best you can to help develop the game going forward. So tell us a bit about yourself in terms of your role with Bury Women's Football Club.
Yeah, certainly. So basically, I joined the club sort of in the pre-season last year. Initially, I went in there as the development squad manager. So I was working with players who are sort of towards the back end of the secondary education, so between 15 and 18. And from there, we would then they would then go forward and play for the reserve team or second team. And some of the girls have been fortunate enough to make the first team debuts last season as well, which was great. Also, as part of my role at the club, we formed a really good link last season with a local education provider in Manchester called International House Manchester. And through this, we actually had one of the players, Uneza, who is an international player who came over from Kenya, so just a bit like what David's been talking about there with African football. We had Ineza come over from Kenya, and she was 16. She came over, and she'd never played 11-a-side football. I think it was 9. I think she was saying it was 9v9. But to be fair, when we got to last season, we were blessed with a talent, because she came over with a fantastic attitude. She would train with the likes of John Mack and Frank Sinclair and Matt down at IH during the day, as alongside completing the BTEC diploma, and then she'd come and train with us at Bury on an evening. She's progressed fantastically, and had a good run out with the first last season. And then for me, I took on the role of Bury Women's first team manager about 4 weeks ago, and thoroughly enjoying the journey so far.
Yeah, I mean, with yourself, Chris, obviously you've got a background in fitness. You run a gym as well. You're sort of no stranger to working with top class athletes and so on and so forth. What do you think you'll bring to the women's team? I mean, obviously there's a lot of good work that's been done there, and you're sort of going to carry that on. And what do you think you can do to sort of progress it, keep it going, and move the team forward?
I think for myself personally, as you touched upon there, my background is within strength and conditioning, I mean, I've been in the game now for about 19 years, working from like grassroots level up to sort of elite level in both the men's and the women's game. Currently, we've seen the rise of the Women's Super League. Certainly over the last couple of years, there's been a big money injection through the sponsorship with Barclays, where they've pumped in the money for the WSL clubs. And you've seen the rise of the facilities that the girls are getting there. You just have to look at the facilities down the road at Manchester City. The girls have gone from between 5 and 6 years ago probably training twice a week on the field, to now training in a gym facility probably 2 or 3 times a week on top of their training facilities. So for me, having my own gym in Rochdale, where I've worked with lacrosse players, recently worked with an international lacrosse player. This morning I've been with a hockey player. What I do is with the girls at Bury is I get them in and do some biomechanical assessments. So what in sort of layman's term, what that means is I have a look at how the girls are moving. Is there any restrictions on their movement? And what can I do to increase the speed, the movement patterns, decision making, all that sort of stuff. And I've been fortunate. I've got a fantastic chairwoman in Diana Golding, who she bought the club. She took over. She actually started the club up in 1996, and she's built that into a charter standard club, which we got presented by the FA in December, and she's very, very backing of the ideas that I want to do and the other coaches. And between us, we bring in nutritionists from Salford University. We've had some great links through. We've had nutritionists come in. We've had sports scientists come in. Obviously, through myself, I've got my background in sports performance as well. So more than anything, it's probably building a good network. Make sure you've got the right people around you to invest in the future of the club, and promote women's football within Bury to ultimately take us as far up the pyramid as we can.
That's a great point that you make there, and I think that obviously, Chris, you bring a wealth of experience, yourself being involved in the game, and you got that sort of sports science background and you seem to be a really forward-thinking person. And I think for me, in terms of the playing, it's really important that we sort of keep the momentum going, as I mentioned earlier, in the women's game. And in terms of recruiting players, I mean, how do you guys sort of get the word out to recruit players? Do you have any specific recruitment drives, or do you just sort of hold trials for people to come down, women to come down and sort of train and trial, or what's the process there, Chris?
Sure. So when it comes to recruitment, I mean, we're very fortunate. We've got a really good player pathway at Bury Women, Boys and Girls Club. And we were a big believer in developing the player and to take them to the next level. Last season, we've actually lost some players due to the success with our previous manager Scott, who won the Division 1 title last season and took him to the Premier, which has attracted the so-called the bigger clubs in the higher divisions. A couple of players have gone on to play 2 levels higher. So we've got scouts coming and having a look. But in terms of our recruitment drive, we've got a big presence on social media. So we'll put out adverts. We've got a really good relationship with Bury FC's The Trust as well, which is the charity aspect of Bury FC. And they support us no end. There's a Wildcats programme which is aimed at the younger players to help get players in, which again can provide the player pathway into the club. Social media, we hammer that. We try and showcase the work that we do as well through videos of us training, through interviews with the players, management, coaches, and we've got some good links with, like I say, with International House in Manchester through the FA. And word of mouth as well, because at the moment, how it tends to work as well is obviously you get to, especially sort of the women's first team side, you've got a group of girls who have played from age 8 up to 16, 17, and what we've got to think about is they've got that no like trust situation with each other, so they know how they like to play. So usually, if you get one player signed for you, they'll tend to bring their friends with them as well. And by no means it's not a clique or anything like that. But what they do is the girls will attract players for you as well, which is a massive help. And because unfortunately we're not in the position at the moment where we can go out and spend hundreds or thousands of pounds on transfers at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah, and what about the standard, Chris? How would you say the standard compares to the top tier of women's football in the UK? How would you sort of I know you've only been there for a short while, but from your perspective, how would you sort of gauge in terms of the top tier of football in the UK?
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing, Jimmy, with it, in all honesty, is it's the player's mindset and the willingness to get to the next level. What we've got to consider is the accountability of not only the players but also the coaching staff and the management. And what are people willing to do to get to the next level? I mean, I've been very, very fortunate within my coaching career to work with some fantastic coaches who have they've performed at the highest level. One of my previous clubs that I was only at 4 years ago have actually gone on to play in the Women's Super League now. And if I'm being totally honest, there's not a huge gap. I think the only difference being that some of the Women's Super League clubs they'll be training 4 or 5 times a week. But again, you've got teams in the Women's Super League who are only training 2 or 3 times a week as well. We at Bury, our senior teams, we train twice a week. But I mean, a lot of our girls are very committed. Some of them attend the football college as well as Bury. A lot of them are members of the gym, and some of them have even got their own personal trainers as well. So I don't think there's a massive amount of difference, if I'm being totally honest, with the quality of the play. I think it's, if anything, it's more about the experience. Because you look at West Ham United, for example. Last season, it was their first year in the Women's Super League, and I think they only took about. It was a very, very small quantity of player from their days playing in the National League or the Southwest League, and they were in a fortunate position where they had an investor come in, and they were able to put some money into the club, which obviously attracted a better calibre of player. So money does talk, but in saying that, it's not all. It's not all about the money. It's about how uncomfortable is that player willing to make themselves to perform it to the next level and make a name of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make there, Chris, and certainly in the conversation I've been having with David Dias, who's over here from Angola at the moment. We sort of touched on the facilities over in Africa in certain clubs at the moment, and obviously the players are playing there to the best of their abilities in certain situations where the facilities aren't what they are. Obviously in some places in Europe, and I think that money can take you so far, but you've got to have the mental attributes, you've got to have desire, you've got to have will to succeed, and so on and so forth too. So I think it's really important from my perspective to certainly instill that in the players. And I touched on this earlier, where I think sometimes you can go too much. Money sometimes, as good as it is to get facilities, and we want good resources and want to give the players the best opportunity, but you can get complacent too. If you've got these great facilities around you and that sort of stuff, you can sort of forget what it's all about. And for me, one of my experiences I've seen over the years, because more and more money is coming into the game at the highest level, it's not dripping down to the pyramid, so to speak. You're getting a really big transparency. Is that happening in the women's game? We're getting a transparency between the biggest teams and the teams low in the pyramid in the league, Chris? I
think, to be honest, I think a lot of it depends on how much support they get from the main club, the men's club as well. Really, you look at how Manchester City have been developing, or more recently Manchester United, and Man United over the last few years have gone from having a very, very well reputable. They've got a centre of excellence that's had a very, very good reputation, producing players that have competed at a good level and gone on to play for clubs in America, where there's a huge following with women's football. To go in the Women's Super League, and I think a lot of it does depend on the profile of the club, and some of that is down to those involved, I suppose, as well. So how much are you going to, how much do you want to promote the club? How much do you want the club to be known in the community? And I think a lot of it is about how much promotion is actually made for it. I mean, on the back of the Women's World Cup, now's the prime time where a lot of both men and women are taking a lot of interest in it and are wanting to play. You just have to look in the gate receipts. I think at the Women's FA Cup final last season, there's over 50,000 people that were packed into Wembley Stadium. 10 years ago, you'd be lucky to get 10% of that. So it just shows how the game's progressing over the last few years.
Absolutely, Chris, and long may it progress. I think it's really important, and people like yourself who are in the game, forward-thinking people who've got strong background in the physical side, in development, and you obviously place a big priority in mindset too, and I think it's really important to have people like yourself in the game with your experience to keep it progressing. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for coming on board the show, and sincerely wish you all the best for the forthcoming season. Chris, thanks for coming on board the show.
No, thanks very much for the opportunity, Jimmy. I much appreciate it.
So there we have it, a really fascinating insight into the world of women's football. And we think women's football, we watched the World Cup, and obviously it was great watching the World Cup, but beyond the World Cup, it's really important we keep the momentum going and so on and so forth. And it's really fascinating because, Chris has given us an insight into what it's like in the game on a week-to-week basis as well, which is key. So really interesting stuff. Really interesting thoughts by Chris. So just going to back to our guest before we sort of speak to Mel. Just going to sort of back to our guest David Dias, who's been giving us a really interesting insight into the world of football in Angola. Where do you see Angolan football going from here, David? I mean, you mentioned the challenges that not only Angola has, but Africa has in general with football around facilities. But we also know that Africa produces and has produced some of the best players in the world, without a shadow of a doubt. For me, one of my favourite African players, if not my favourite African player at the moment, plays for a team I support, Napoli. There's no secret, I'm a big Napoli fan. Koulibaly, and for me, he's the greatest centre half. People say, well, you would say you're a Napoli fan, but he is. And for me, this is sort of not undermining the likes of Harry Maguire, who's gone to United for 80 million, but I think if Harry Maguire has gone to United for 80 million and is a great player, a great World Cup, goodness knows how much Koulibaly's worth. So, for me, Africa still is this sort of untapped resource. There's players out there that are phenomenal. We don't get to see them, and we think if they could train in an environment with great facilities, how far could they flourish? We've seen that. Are there any players in Angola we should look out for, David? Any sort of players that you can think of that could make the step to Europe, in your experience?
Yeah, I have a lot of players that can do play in Europe. The problems I have is like the opportunity is not the best one. Sometimes, because in Angola I have great players. In the moment, all have 4 players. He play outside the country. I don't speak about the lads born already in Europe. But the players he play in this time in Europe is like Gerson Dallas and Bastos and Shaw. These 3, he started playing in Angola. Now he's playing the big teams because Lazio is a great team in Italy.
Yes,
Gerson Dallas play for Sporting Lisbon.
Yeah.
I have more chance because I have a lot of young players. The problem is no chance. The agents sports agents is look more for the teams. The country have the big names like Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana. You know, you already have a name in Africa. It should be some. I don't talk about the coaches because coaches don't get, like one coach leave the UK if you go to Angola for watch the players. Because you have a lot of the Argentines. I think you need more look to another country, not just Angola, because you see Madagascar. Nobody talk about Madagascar. They do a great campaign in African nations.
Absolutely.
Yes, Mauritania is the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you just need to keep players in small countries have a great players. Maybe if you come here, it's a more cheaper for buy one player from Angola, the Cameroon or Ghana.
Absolutely. And that's sort of the point I was trying to make with the Harry Maguire situation. And I rate him very highly as a player, but I'm thinking, you know, if you look at, say, the likes of Koulibaly for Napoli, who's an absolute phenomenal player, you know, in anyone's opinion, and you think, well, you know, there must be other players like that out there, but you've got to cast the net wide. I mean, the scouting network these days is improved. It's out there. I mean, not many players get missed in that respect, but obviously it's hard to cover every blade of grass, but I certainly think for sure. But equally, that's where I think people like yourself come in, who's got the European experience and African experience, to sort of like, you know, give a balanced perspective. Because I know if I'm talking to David about a player, he's going to give me an honest opinion. That's not undermining agents, because agents, you know, some good ones and some bad ones. But equally, I know if I'm sort of working for a team, if I phone you up, I'm going to get, you know, the truth. But I know an agent's going to say, well, you know, he's the best player. Then he arrives and think, goodness me. But our next guest is really interesting, because we talk about, you know, different coaches from abroad. I must admit, I hold my hands up. You know, when Wolves first appointed the coach, I wasn't sure how he'd go, and then when I saw him signing a young team and young Portuguese players, I thought, well, are they going to cut it in the Championship? And I admit, I hold my hands up, but you know, not only they cut in the Championship, and I went to watch him in the Championship a couple of times, they've cut it in the Premiership, and they've pushed up to like 6th position, I think it was it last year. But this season, obviously there's big expectations. So our next guest, you know, he is a Wolves legend. I don't know if he's going to react, me calling him that, but he works in the media, he's a performance coach, you know, fantastic guy as well. But great to have him on the show. Who better to talk about Wolves than Mel? Mel, great to have you on the show. Can you hear me, Mel?
I can, Jimmy, yeah. Great to join you.
Yeah, always good to have you on board. And it's been a fascinating show this evening. We've sort of talked to Chris Horner, who's a women's coach over at Barry FC. We talked about the importance of the momentum keeping going for the women's football. It's not just about the World Cup, it's about, you know, all year round. And also David Dias, who's over here from Angola at the moment. You know, David Dias, he works for a team in Angola called Caála, but he's been on the scene in Europe and in South America, in Portugal, in the UK. I've had the privilege of working with David as well, by the way. He's a phenomenal coach, and we're sort of touching base and talking about, you know, African football and Angola and what he's up to at the moment. But, you know, sort of close to the home in one sense, you know, in the UK, Wolves had a great season last year. I don't know if you heard me say, Mel, I must admit, I hold my hands up. I was surprised how successful they were, not just in the Championship, but in the Premier League. You know, I hold my hands up. The coach has done a phenomenal job. He's brought young players in, you know, from abroad, and they've certainly shone. What can we expect from Wolves this season, Mel?
Well, from a Wolves perspective, hopefully more of the same. Yes, it surprised a lot of people. It's a pleasant surprise, and everybody's kind of still pinching themselves a little bit at Wolves, because we've gone decades, probably 30-odd years, without any real success. And, you know, to get back and competing at the top level now, and every time we go into a game, Wolves can take anybody on. They're not going to beat everybody. They're not that consistent yet, but they've given all of the top teams a good game, and so on their day they're capable of beating anybody, which is, as I say, hasn't been the case for decades. So it's great at the moment to be associated with Wolves.
Yeah, what's really interesting, Mel, is our guest David has worked in Portugal as well, and and what's really interesting is that we've seen the success of coaches from Portugal over the years. Mourinho being the obvious one, Queiroz as well, who was a phenomenal coach, and I think he's still with Iran. Correct me if I'm wrong, but more to the point, we've seen obviously the manager Nuno at Wolves, but I think what's really interesting really is the contrasting styles of football too. I mean, we sort of the contrasting styles. Correct me if I'm wrong, but watching Wolves from a distance, they're a team that attack from the outset. They don't have any fear. I remember watching them last year against Man United, thinking this team here has no fear. Obviously, United aren't the United that they were a few years ago, but they're still Manchester United. And even watching them against City as well. Do you think that the managers sort of instill that in them, Mel, to just go out there and sort of give it a good go? And
well, look, what he instills is confidence and belief in the way that they do things. It all starts with work and hours, hundreds of hours spent on the training pitch, really fine-tuning when everybody knows what they're doing, when the team has the ball and when the team doesn't have the ball is the important thing. They're very good organisationally, defensively. Everybody knows their jobs. He plays what you would call a 3-5-2. It started as a 3-4-3, but it's developed into probably more of a 3-5-2 now with the wing backs, three at the back. Connor Cody, who was traditionally a midfield player and has been used at right back for Wolves, has been instrumental in just slotting in there as the kingpin, as the pivot, more or less the centre of the three at the back, and he's been outstanding. Then they brought in other good players around him. At the moment, Willy Bolly has been excellent, and Ryan Bennett, the two centre backs. Patricio in goal has been different class. Obviously, he's a legend for his country, and then to bring in another Portuguese legend in João Moutinho in midfield to add some real experience and quality there, just to guide everybody, the younger players such as Ruben Neves, who everybody knows about now. Den Donker has come to the fore, he's been excellent. And then up front with Raúl Jiménez, the Mexican striker, he's finding his feet now, and he's fitted in really well and scoring goals. And another brilliant guy up front, Diogo Jota, has been excellent. And then we've added 3 or 4 players to the squad as well. No outstanding, what you would call big 50, 60 million purchases like Man City would do or whatever, but they say they've quietly gone about their business again and added to the squad. But it's the big thing is that they've kept the players that were there last year, Jimmy. They've kept everything together. A bit like Spurs, they get a good bunch of players and then they keep working and working with the same squad.
I like that they've kept the players, Mel. I think that's really important because, sometimes you get players, they sort of leave too early in the sense that I think that, it was a great club, there's ambition. I'm sort of going to touch on shortly whether you think they can break into that top 4, because I think that's realistic. I think for me, if there's a year that another team could break into that top 4, this could be the year, because Man United, certainly aren't what they were. Chelsea are in bit of transition with a new manager themselves as well. Arsenal, probably you could argue still in transition. So for me, other than City and Liverpool, it's up for grabs. I mean, Tottenham's probably the most settled team, I would say, of the teams from the point of view that obviously City and Liverpool are set. So I certainly think that sort of that. But even with Tottenham, you kind of think, well, they're a fantastic team. They've gelled really well. But I personally wouldn't put them in the calibre of the likes of, say, a City or Liverpool. That said, they'll probably go and win the league now. But the point being, do you think that top four, there's a spot up for grabs there? Mel, is there a chance for someone to sort of open the door this season? Or what are your thoughts on that? Can Wolves do it?
They certainly can do it, yeah. I mean, it's a big ask, Jimmy. When Fosun took over Wolves 3 years ago, the first year they went through 4 managers until they then got the hang of running a football club, and brought in Nuno Espirito Santo, who's been an absolute breath of fresh air and has been phenomenal for the club, sweeping the championship aside and winning the league comfortably, and then acquitting themselves so well last year in the Premier League, which I must say was a surprise to everybody how well they'd done. Not that they would that they'd comfortably kind of get to grips with the Premier League, but how well they did it and the style that they did it in as well, and the way that they competed against the established top 6 was brilliant from a Wolves point of view. So yes, Fosun have got a 10-year plan to be up there and competing at the top end where Manchester City and Liverpool are now. That's where Fosun gave themselves a 10-year plan to do that, and I think they're 2 or 3 years ahead of schedule, definitely. So who knows? Who knows? Let's see. I think Wolves have great faith in the manager. I know that you can tell that there's a settled camp here at Molineux, with the fact that no players have left that were regulars in the side. Obviously, other players move on, and they've loaned some players out to get them. They don't want to be on the bench all the time, and they brought more players in. So I think they're developing very well. I think you've got to trust every club is ultimately as good as the manager and the players, but then the recruitment is crucial at football clubs, as we saw last year with the other dynamic. Fulham spent 120 odd million or something and went down. So you've got to get your recruitment right, and that's been one of the things. I'm sure you'll probably have more idea of this than me being up there, Jimmy. Man United, I think, have suffered from bringing in obviously quality players individually, but they haven't been able to gel them as a team, and they've not brought the right players in to fit the culture of Man United. Probably, I don't know, but that's what I see from the outside. But I think Nuno's very insistent on that when players come in that they're not going to upset the dressing room. That's a big thing. We hear that said in football all the time, that you've got to have a good dressing room to win things, at least win things consistently, and that's obviously what's happening at with Pep at City, and also Klopp at Liverpool. They're excellent managers. Same with Pochettino. I think Pochettino engenders a great atmosphere and energy around the place down there at Tottenham as well. And Nuno comes into that category. He's not there. He's got a long way to go to get to those three that I've just mentioned level. But he's certainly doing a good job at the moment.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm glad you sort of touched on that, Mel, because last season there was talk of him going to Chelsea, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure he could go to Chelsea and do a good job. Obviously, I manage an anyway in Lampard, but the point being is that we live in a world these days where 1 or 2 good seasons here and there, and we talk about players and managers going here and everywhere. I mean, from a perspective, I'm like everybody else over here. I want to see English players given the chance. I want to see England do well as much as anybody else, and English players get the chance. But what I would say, and this is and I mentioned earlier before, there's certainly no disrespect intended, because he's a great player, and by all accounts he's gone, or I'm not sure if he's already gone or going to United for what's being touted as being £80 million. But Maguire from Leicester, and you think to yourself, well, I guess the player what the player goes for, you've got to consider what it's worth to the club. So, can you get a player, if you're not in Champions League, to play for you if you compete against teams that are in Champions League? And that's tough to start with, and you've got to sort of, spend based on obviously how important the play is for you. But when you look at it from a broader perspective, what Nuno's done, Rolly's brought players in, not necessarily on the cheap. They have spent, but he's got players, I think, for me, that are valued more now than they were when he got them in. And to use the Maguire as an example, take the likes of the Van Dijk fee for Liverpool looks like a drop in the ocean. Koulibaly, we talked about, my beloved Napoli. I think they bought him from a Belgian club anyway, but what he's worth now, the club could no doubt sell him for astronomical fee, but he's worth more than that to the club. But the point I'm trying to say here is that as much as we want to sort of promote young players, how important do you think it is that we do continue to get players from abroad that can enhance the game, Mel? I think, is that sort of crucial? Do you think that we sort of, to think big picture, and these players coming in from abroad to the UK and coaches that are at the highest level, they enhance the game, and I think it's really important that carries on, as well as encouraging young English players to come through too. Getting the balance isn't easy. Mel, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think it's a world game now. The Premier League is absolutely top draw. It's marketed itself brilliantly. It's a massive draw and money earner. In football, the business of football. Everybody wants to come and play at the top level. The Premier League attracts all the best players. Serie A and La Liga in Spain are, have spent a lot of money trying to catch up, really, because they can see that the Premier League are attracting the top players. So, but your Juventuses and Milan teams, etc., and obviously Real Madrid, Barcelona are always going to attract, your top players. But the big thing about attracting players and managers from all over the world is you're talking about the standards going up. It's all about standards going up. So, and they're always going to be good. If you're good enough, you're still going to make it. There may be less, say, from England's point of view, less England players that qualify to play for England national team. But the quality of the players is going to be right up there. You're talking about Maguire. I think the boy's been excellent, and I think that's a great signing for Man United. Yes, the figures look astronomical compared to what we've seen before, but if you compare him with Van Dijk, I think he's up there. I think Van Dijk was one of the missing pieces for Liverpool. I think he was immense for them, and if Maguire can be similar to Man United, I think it'll be a great signing for Solskjaer. And Man United, you mentioned about that, but Man United are one of the world's biggest clubs. I mean, they're a massive draw, and them not being in the Champions League at the moment, I don't think will put any top players off coming to them. I really don't, because Man United are just phenomenal, and I can understand Maguire walking there on his hands and knees, to be perfectly honest, because it's such a big club. Get it right at Man United, and they'll be back there, where they were under Fergie. And but it's going to take some time, because they've just taken their eye off the ball for a few years, and haven't quite got it right. But and that's probably more behind the scenes as opposed to the football manager per se. On the recruitment's hasn't been the best, and they haven't been singing off the same hymn sheet from the owners through to the football side of the business. Yeah, they've still brought in a lot on the commercial side, but you can't take your eye off the football side for 1 minute. That's why getting that right is is crucial at the end of the day. And that's what Wolves are doing at the moment. They're getting things right, but it only takes a little hiccup, a bad signing here, a little wrong move there, a little bit of a falling out maybe behind the scenes from, with the manager and one of the owners or something, and then we know what that can lead to.
Absolutely.
But it all seems okay at the moment.
Absolutely. And I think as well as that too, with United too, when under Fergie, it's a different world than it was then. I mean, at the time, City didn't have the money they have now, or at least we're only coming into it, and the likes of, Chelsea as well. So I think from that point of view, like you says, I mean, I think for me, absolutely, Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and it's a massive draw card. That's for sure. But football, being the way it is, it evolves and keeps moving forward. I don't think, from my perspective, they're going to be the dominant force that they were before, as long as the likes of Chelsea and City and other teams have got the money they have. But at the end of the day, I'm sure they can give them a good run. But what I want to do is get a perspective from the outside in terms of, I mean, for me, the Premier League is the most entertaining league in the world. I think City and Liverpool are the best teams from the point of view. I think I'm going to throw it out there. I think that if City and Liverpool played in the Serie A or the Liga, they'd win those leagues. And I think the likes of a Juventus and Real Madrid probably struggle in the Premier League. But that's just my perspective. I'm probably going to get some backlash now. But I want to see from the outside looking in, someone who's sort of just been coaching in Africa. What are your thoughts on European football? From an African perspective, David, where do you see English football? How do people in Africa see English football or European football? Do they think the Spanish league is the strongest, the Italian, the English league is the strongest? What's your perception when you're sitting in a bar in Africa watching football? What do the coaches say about, what do they think about football over here?
Yeah, because all people in Africa watch like a big match, like Manchester City versus Liverpool. Yeah. You still look for the Premiership because the entertainment is different, because I have great players like City, the Liverpool or Tottenham. Is the game all the time is a top game. The way the people in Africa see the games in UK is because the game in UK, the football in UK, is a very, very, very quickly. The players they do it box to box all the time. You never know the result because till the end, one team maybe in 45 minutes is score 3 goals, and another 45 minutes another team is score 4 goals or 4-4. That's the people in Africa see, because it's so strong the Premier League here, because all people in Africa look for the. You talk about the La Liga or the Portugal. When you see Portugal games, is more Porto, Benfica, and Sporting Benfica. Is not the low team. Now in UK, the low team, you got to play versus Manchester City or Manchester United or Liverpool. He plays very well. He never give up. That's the desire the players you need to have. Because when you stay in Manchester United, you got to play like to Wolverhampton, think, I'm Manchester United. The players think like that.
Absolutely. Isn't that amazing when you think about it, and Mel, in that respect, where, the beauty about the Premier League, you could be sitting in a bar in Angola or in New York or in California somewhere, and it's beamed around the world. I mean, I think sort of going back to the influence that players have, from foreign countries around the world. What are your thoughts on that as a global package, Mel?
Well, I've said I think it's been the best product, football product, and the Premier League, can take great credit. They've the commercial aspect and how they've promoted the Premier League throughout the world, I think, has been absolutely brilliant, and that's the thing that's got the money into the Premier League now, and that's why teams. The Championship is filled with former teams that have been in the Premier League, and they're all dying to get back because that's the place to be. And as David just said, it's really appreciated and supported, and everybody kind of takes that from it, really. That even even if the top teams are playing somebody from the bottom, it's never guaranteed what the result's going to be. That's the point. It is never a guarantee. Whereas in some leagues, there are 2 or 3 at the top, and if they play somebody from the bottom, it's virtually certain they're going to win. Whereas the Premier League is so hard, so competitive, and filled with really good players, every team, and we're talking every team, that every team is, every game is usually really good to watch. Not every game you're going to get the odd, what you'd call turgid 0-0, but the big thing is it's very rare in the Premier League. You know, both teams usually want to get at each other, and as David says, the fitness and intensity, it's and sometimes you may not be able to play like that in Africa obviously with the conditions, you know, with the temperature, humidity, etc. at times in different countries. But that's the good thing about being in England with a temperate climate, is you can usually the players are usually fit enough to go at each other blooming hammer and tongs from the off and carry it on for 90 odd minutes. That's why it gives such great entertainment for everybody watching, you know, on the TV worldwide and live at the stadiums.
I echo those sentiments, Mel, and you know, time's gone so fast and got the best of us again, and what a great show we've had this evening. Mel, I want to really thank you for coming on board the show. It's been fantastic getting an insight into Wolves. We wish Wolves all the best, and no doubt we'll speak again throughout the season. So thanks again, Mel, for coming on board. You know,
always a pleasure, Jimmy.
Fantastic, and I want to thank Chris as well for coming on board too, and sharing a great insight into the world of women's football, and he's at Bury FC, and you know, friend of mine, long-term friend of mine, David Dias. It's been great to speak to you and see you again, and great to pick up where we left off, and you know, wish you all the best while you're in the UK, and hopefully the right opportunity comes up for you, and you know, the work you've been doing in Angola is phenomenal, and you know, I know the work you've done in the UK in the past has been phenomenal, so you know, no doubt you'll bring your expertise and experience to the UK that you have from around the world, and help players develop and help players get into the game to be the best they can be. It's been a fantastic show this evening, incredible guest. The goal is to bring you all the way from local sports and also from around the world. It's great to have you listening, and whatever you're doing, wherever you are on the weekend, make sure you get behind the teams in the area. Salford, who's made a good start to life in league football too. Until next week, same time, same place, have a fantastic weekend, and tune in next week. Thank you.